All right, so we already delved into the technology of how does a blockchain works. We look at all the various components that make up the technology, and now we are looking at the applications of blockchain because having the technology is one thing, but where can the technology be used and in what particular context are we talking about? So, industrial applications of blockchain is going to help us to make the distinction from the centralized authority to decentralized, look at many different components of that application to help us understand that this technology is creatively destructive. So let's take a look at a video that briefly gives us some key importance of understanding what blockchain really is and its application in the real world.
There's no way you haven't heard about blockchain. You've probably heard about Bitcoin, but that's not really what we're focusing on here because trying to describe blockchain by only talking about Bitcoin is like trying to describe the entire internet but only talking about email. Like the internet, blockchain might just change everything. Blockchain means that you don't need to trust anyone anymore. At least, not when it comes to keeping records. We kind of take it for granted, but just to exist in society, you need to put your blind faith in a ton of different institutions. And as we've seen lately, that's not necessarily a good thing. For example, to take out a loan, you need to trust that a bank is going to trust a credit bureau with all your financial information and then trust that the credit score they calculate using a secret formula is accurate. You need to trust that the system works. And a lot of the time, it doesn't. Why are we so trusting with our public information? There's gotta be a better way. And blockchain is that better way. Think of blockchain like an open book of records, and everyone has the same copy. Each entry in the book references the record before it, making it obvious if any of them are changed after they're entered. What's more, since everyone has the same book, they can see if one or more of the books has been tampered with or edited since they don't match up exactly. The technology behind this is a little complicated, but in short, each block of this chain takes an intentionally large amount of computing power to validate that it's a legitimate block. So what you're left with is an extremely secure record that can't be edited and everyone can see. And that's going to radically change quite a few industries. For one obvious example, blockchain means that you don't need a bank to withdraw your currency. A complete record of your account balance is easily accessible, as is the record of the withdrawal. Nobody needs to vouch that the money is available or that you received it. It's all recorded right there. A slightly more complicated example involves blockchain systems involved in a contract, like, say, a lease for an apartment. The blockchain record could have built-in terms, like a price per month in exchange for an access code to the apartment. As a landlord, you don't need to worry that you won't be paid every month. And as a tenant, you don't need to trust that your landlord will let you in the building. A blockchain smart contract would facilitate both sides of the transaction, verifying that the actions are legitimate and leaving behind an immutable record. No more sending checks. Think of how many other people and companies you need to trust when you're conducting business or any kind of valuable transaction, like your vote. Imagine submitting a voter ID, a private passcode, and who you're voting for into a public record, one that's checked and tallied by a million other people at the same time. The parameters of the blockchain could verify that you're eligible to vote, that you are who you say you are, and record your vote in a public, unalterable record, but without identifying who you voted for. A version of this was even implemented in Colombia as a mock test run, and it worked. Companies are even using blockchain internally to verify that their supply lines are all working together and in total transparency, as each step in the line from manufacturing to distribution is linked together by a blockchain. Musicians can make sure they're paid for every stream of a song. Resumes and work histories can be accessed at a glance. Your medical records can be implemented in a blockchain, allowing a doctor to see and share your history. It can even be designed to spot drug interactions or to make sure prescriptions are written and filled. In short, blockchain cuts out a middleman you'd have to trust and allows faster, secure, and transparent use of information, and it also shows how that information is used. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and
So I'm sure you're beginning to see the use cases of blockchain. It's really exciting in terms of really where this technology is going and how it can simplify the way we do business on a day-to-day basis. So, first and foremost, why is a blockchain important? You already identified what a blockchain is, but here comes the next question. Why is the blockchain important? What makes the blockchain important? But here's what makes the blockchain important: the centralized component of everyday life. We almost forget that record keeping is practically centralized or semi centralized. We need to trust record keepers, and these record keepers keep track of transactions and the statuses of these transactions, like banks and financial institutions, land registries, real estate transactions, and assets, etc., etc. They all have record keeping, and that is a centralized process in terms of how it's done. We take for granted on a day-to-day basis of how much centralization impacts us, whether it's medical data, names of passengers on a flight, your company's registration data, your academic certificates, your bank account transactions, the ownership of records of corporate securities, etc., etc. Centralization and record keeping plays practically a functional role in our day-to-day lives. So, what's wrong with centralization? First and foremost, record keepers. Record keepers must be trusted. You must trust the person or the organization that is running your company in terms of managing it, in terms of the records, keeping track of your records, medical, and so on. There are always going to be issues along that line: trustworthiness. There could be business failures, corruption, and even hacking. That has happened many times. Many times it has already happened. Record keepers are also gatekeepers. They're the ones who control the participation in the system and in terms of what transaction takes place and the movement of data. Record keepers are also what we will term single points of failure, called SPF. They could lose the records, it could be hacked, it could be stolen. So, record keepers could, in fact, create problems more than what they are looking to do right now. And that is what we're looking at, that centralization component. We're not saying that centralization did not effectively do what it's supposed to do, but we're beginning to realize, as the world is becoming more complex and there is a greater demand for business application speed, which is another important point. Record keepers tend to be slow, and we need to find more creative solutions. And what we are in fact doing is looking at creative solutions. So, moving towards decentralization, decentralized systems do not have gatekeepers, single point of failure, whereby records could be hacked, it could be stolen, it could be compromised. Even though in a decentralized system we are dealing with parties we don't know, we don't trust, but in a decentralized system, the technology, the blockchain system allows a facilitation of trust. And that is the key component that I want you to remember. Two examples of a decentralized model that has worked extremely well is: number one, the internet. No one actually owns the internet, even though in some countries like China, access to the internet can be censored. They still can't control or shut down. If governments could have shut down the internet, it would have been done already. But since there is not a single point of failure or control, they cannot do that. So, two examples: the internet and, of course, the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin is, by extension, the creation of the Satoshi Nakamoto. Back in 2008 into 2009, early January 2009, when the first Genesis block was in fact mined. No one controls the Bitcoin network. No one has access to it. It's not a network that has a single point of failure. It does not have gatekeepers. Every single network or computer device or server is independent. If one fails, the others take up the slack. And that's one of the unique use cases for decentralized blockchains. So let's look at the characteristics of blockchain systems. It's a peer-to-peer system, it's distributed, it's reliable, but more importantly, it's censorship resistant. It's public. We're looking at public blockchains right now. There are ones that are permissionless and are mutable, meaning the transactions are permanently recorded and it cannot be changed. Some disadvantages might be questionable, meaning it's extremely fast. So if you're not particularly in tune with the technology, there could be teething problems, which is in fact happening, and it's probably affecting what we will term mass adoption. And by extension, because it's secure as well, majority of participants must be benevolent, otherwise not. It's not based on trust. It's not based on you knowing the person. So there are plus and minuses to that. In fact, in any situation, depending on how we look at it, there are always pluses and minuses. So let's look at the industrial applications of blockchain and how that actually fits in into the greater scheme of real world applications. So what applications can we build on a blockchain? There are two types. Number one, we have the type A, which is, we will say it's boring stuff, and type B, which is the exciting stuff. Now, the boring stuff is basically supply chain management, healthcare, energy, finance, all of these things that already needs some form of boosting in terms of its efficiency, in terms of its model, and in terms of its application in the real world. That's already happening, because many internet-based applications can and will be moved to the blockchain system because it's cheaper, faster, more efficient, and of course, cost is a main consideration in the use of a blockchain because it's significantly cheaper. But the exciting stuff is where we will be increasingly seeing, or where we will increasingly see, rather, native blockchain applications. Take note of that word, native blockchain applications. Native blockchain applications simply means things that could not have been built before the blockchain. A Bitcoin is an example. Bitcoin could not have existed before the blockchain because a cryptocurrency is not a blockchain. A blockchain is the technology behind a cryptocurrency. So these will be the ones generating exponential order of magnitude improvements. We have only started to see the tip of the iceberg for such of these, for many of these applications. So we can expect a wave of innovation, value creation, and take note of this word as well, creative destruction of all industries in the coming years. So native blockchain applications is the future. That's where we're going to see the most amount of innovation and, by extension, creative destruction. Very, very exciting. So this um, graph gives you that native blockchain application representation. We're going to have decentralized finance known as DeFi. We're going to have decentralized infrastructure. We're going to have decentralized markets, decentralized organizations. Now, DeFi, of course, the use of the technology, blockchain technology, and its various applications and systems to make the use of money and its applications much more uh, seamless in terms of assets, claims, royalties, lending, etc. All unique applications that are already part of the existing financial system, but a step above the rest. Then we have the Internet of Value, self-sovereign identities. These are decentralized markets, decentralized markets dealing with a new version of the stock exchange, how it's going to exist in terms of a new representation of value. And of course, decentralized organizations that are run strictly on a blockchain, fully autonomous, using smart contracts, and does not need any intermediaries. These are going to be new case studies and case models for native blockchain applications, which are already beginning to take effect. We're also creating the new WWW, the new internet, and the new internet of value. The new internet, the previous internet is the internet of information. The internet we are seeing here is the internet of value, where blockchain enables a new kind of internet, from the internet of information to the internet of value. And that's changing. But guess what? Even the basic internet architecture is still ripe for disruption. Ripe for destruction with applications such as decentralized DNS, which is the internet. We're also dealing with SSIs, self-sovereign identities. Will use blockchain infrastructures to solve identity fraud problems of the current internet, which is a serious problem on the internet right now. disintermediating identity verification will create multi-sources, multi-verifiers, digitally signed credentials that will ultimately use some form of zero knowledge. So the new internet will have less problems as it relates to identity, because identity has a lot to do with trust. And if we can eliminate trust issues, well, then we are well on our way to creating an autonomous system. We're creating a new industrial economy. That's another application. We have business smart contracts, a new wave of algorithmic governance, enabling new forms of industrial organizations that will supersede archaic, hierarchical, human decision making forms of businesses. Then we have decentralized autonomous organizations. That's DAOs. You would have seen that on the native blockchains, the slide before that. New forms of spontaneous, semi-spontaneous organizations that will merge or move into what we will call digital collectibles, the new NFTs, as well as many other applications in institutions. So you're beginning to see the list is almost exhaustive when we even looking at native blockchains. Native blockchains is the space of innovation, and this is the space for creative destruction, even creating the commerce of the future, reinventing capital markets in terms of who can invest, democratizing the access, but also on what can be invested in terms of fractional ownership. And this now paves the way for what we will also be talking about, tokenization, which gives everyone a little piece of the action. So, in terms of creating commerce for the future, we are dealing with data and prediction of markets, and we're also dealing with smart contracts. These are ways in which monetization are in fact going to happen, and you're going to see more and more innovation happening in this space, commerce space. So everything up to now has ultimately been about tokenization. The first tokenized or native token is Bitcoin, because Bitcoin could not have existed before blockchain. So it was the first since 2009, and we moved into altcoins, colored coins, smart contracts, ICOs, STOs, now IEOs, which are now the new forms of financing, and it's changing the behavior of how innovation is now taking place. So this is the most important part when we look at tokenization. Native blockchains are in fact paving the way for innovation, and it's paving the way for tokenization. So tokenization is about using distributed ledger technology called DLTs to prove one's ownership of real life assets as well as rights. That's very important. That's what tokenization is. And we're going to go a little bit into tokenization because you really want to pay attention to what tokenization is doing in the native blockchain space. So, in terms of physical assets, securities, real estate, art, anything physical that represents value, and of course, digital rights like licenses, intellectual property rights, future income rights, claims that are maybe non tangible can be represented as a form of tokenization. And of course, the use cases, the benefits. Tokens are trivially created, they can be stored, they can be traded. They're also liquid in terms of liquidity as well, which includes fractional ownership. So, fractional ownership allows for the use of many persons to participate in the ownership of an asset without necessarily having one person owning that asset. And that's where the power of tokenization is going to take effect. It's very, very exciting. And as we continue these use cases, you're going to see more and more of it. But more importantly, decentralization does not destroy. I want you to look at that word particularly. Decentralization does not destroy intermediaries, it replaces them. So we're going to have new intermediaries are needed for all non-native assets like token generators, token issuers, token validators, token custodians, exchange service providers, and token identity service providers. All are new forms of intermediaries which are actually replacing the old, defunct, and soon to become obsolete centralized systems. So a lot is happening in this space. One of the things I want you to do some research on, and this is going to be part of your coursework material is to look at an example of what we will call new mediation or registration requirements. That happened back in late 2019, and it's called the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act of 2020. I want you to take a look at that, study it, because it has many use case applications for tokenization, the new native blockchain innovative space that we're talking about, creative destruction. So the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act foresees no less than 10 different rules associated with registrations and licensing, whether it be personal requirements, organizational requirements, minimal capital requirements, internal control mechanisms, as well as KYC, anti-money laundering, CFTs, due diligence can all be tokenized. But let's go a little bit in terms of the Liechtenstein Parliament. Liechtenstein Parliament approves the Blockchain Act unanimously as of October 2019, where they passed the Token and Trusted Technology Service Provider Act, TVTG, in the past known as the Blockchain Act. This means that the law can now enter into force on January the 1st, 2020, which has already taken place because we are now in 2021. So a lot is already happening. But first and foremost, you might be hearing Liechtenstein. Where is Liechtenstein? Liechtenstein is actually between Austria and Switzerland. They actually speak German. It is actually one of the world's, believe it or not, richest country per capita, driven by just about 12.5% corporate tax rate, among the lowest in the continent, meaning the European continent, and the freewheeling incorporation rules resulting in many holding companies establishing offices in the country and capital. So Liechtenstein is the place where Liechtenstein Blockchain Act was created. And that's something you want to take note of because it is a real use case of a company, of a country passing legislative laws to govern tokenization. Another area in where tokenization is going to take place is in real estate, in terms of property owners, how they can monetize their property, how property investors can actually raise capital through tokenization, and how real estate markets are inefficient and illiquid, and they are. And a use case I'll give you of that is if you have let's say an acre of land right now, you can't take piece of it and sell it right now if you needed cash. Tokenization will solve many of those problems. And I'm really excited in this space. And as you begin to see how the applications are unfolding in the real world, you're beginning to see that the world is a bigger place with native blockchains, innovative, creative destruction already taking place. So the next stock market, new platforms and exchanges are going to rise, where we're going to have a better representation of value. And that's important. Proper representation of value. In the next stock market, many owners can sell ownership rights to arbitrary percentages of their property. Investors can acquire property ownership rights anywhere in the world with minimum capital and expenses. Liquid and efficient markets for global real estate will be created as a result of these blockchain-based real estate exchange markets being created now because of native blockchains. Very practical, very forward thinking, and it's going to help a lot of people create more wealth. So if you understand where the technology is going, how it's positioning itself in many of the new key areas, the creative destruction part of it, how you can understand where it's going, then you can actually position yourself and also create wealth because of where the technology is going. We can tokenize future income streams. People need funding at their earliest or middle career stages of their lives when they're pursuing their goals. Athletes, artists, even students. Now, with tokenization, it is going to open the field. It's going to open the door for financing options, for one to be able to tokenize much needed income that you're going to need for growth when you're in your career. You need it now, and it's going to allow that to flow effortlessly. We are tokenizing ownership of one's future, platforms that tokenize career prospects, one that enables talent to build up careers, enabling investors to fund talents, investing on their future achievements and income, and markets that bring together investors and talent that can be created, all creatively destruction, creative destruction. So, blockchain is, in fact, the next step in digital transformation. So, in summary, blockchains are a revolutionary foundational technology. They are the next internet layer. They are actually allowing for a decentralized flow of value. And that is the operative word, decentralized flow of value. It's really what blockchain systems are. It's about value. They will unleash a wave of creative destruction in the old internet economy, replacing current intermediaries with new ones. We already identified some of those. As a foundational technology, blockchain can be applied almost everywhere. But the really exciting applications are going to be the native ones, those that cannot exist without a decentralized infrastructure. Native creative destruction is where you're going to find majority of the innovation taking place in the field of blockchain technology. These include decentralized finance, decentralized infrastructure, decentralized organizations called DAOs, and decentralized markets, which we briefly touched on to give you a global perspective as to where this thing is going. And more importantly, you want to take cognizance of tokenization is the next blockchain frontier. Tokenization is the next, as I've said before, the next blockchain frontier, where we can tokenize physical assets like real estate, we can tokenize virtual assets like future income streams. And the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act, the Act of Parliament, very important read for you to understand, deals specifically about tokenizing all forms of assets. And that is very futuristic thinking. So if a country understands this, one of the richest countries per capita in Europe is thinking along that line, well, then we need to pay attention to where this technology is going, the creative destruction that's taking place, and all the exciting things. So, as we come to the end of this module, I trust that you got a bigger perspective as the use cases of blockchain technology, the where the whole technology is going, and how you can position yourself for increasing your wealth potential. Thank you.